Okay, so hi, I'm Tahira. I'm currently a UI UX designer, and I'll be talking you through the future of culturally sensitive wellbeing support for food anxiety. Everybody in the world has a relationship with food, some good and some not so good. I've struggled with food anxiety probably my whole life. And growing up in a British Bangladeshi immigrant household presented its own challenges, and searching for familiarity was always a really big part of my life and a big part of that struggle. And these challenges for me manifested themselves in the form of an eating disorder. But I hope that this talk can show you how design and collaboration has really helped me navigate that challenge to something fruitful. So, eating disorders are a medically diagnosed mental illness where the person's unhealthy preoccupation with their body and the food they consume becomes detrimental to their physical and mental well-being. The NHS are incredibly under-resourced when it comes to eating disorder treatment. An estimated 1.25 million people in the UK are currently diagnosed with eating disorders, but up to 3 times as many people are predicted to be undiagnosed. And due to the long wait times, for as long as up to 3.5 years, many of these people are being turned away until their conditions worsen. So, what is food anxiety? Well, food anxiety is one of the most important early warning signs of an eating disorder. So, if we've got healthy eating on one side of the spectrum and an eating disorder on the other side, food anxiety is essentially that space in between. So, recent research shows that the BAME community, so this is the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic community, and specifically South Asians in the UK, are more likely than other demographics to get eating disorders. And some theories suggest that this is due to the complications of intergenerational trauma. I've got this diagram here on the right-hand side, which kind of showcases how intergenerational trauma has essentially affected different generations. So the grandparents' generations, the parents' generations, and then what we're calling the U generation. So that's and I myself fit into this bottom category of U, which is where a lot of the motivation for this project came from. So young women are particularly affected by the body image expectations of Western beauty standards, as well as cultural pressures. I wanted to read out this quote from Varsha, who was a mental health advocate in eating disorder recovery that I spoke to, just to kind of talk you through the problem. Varsha says, "I gaslit myself because the doctor wasn't helping. My problem came from internalized expectations and stereotypes as they imposed a certain level of pressure, as well as the model minority pressure. My school was predominantly white and there was a certain beauty standard. And when I couldn't fit that standard, I forgot what beauty was." So it's clear that eating disorder treatment doesn't cater to cultural sensitivities on any level. And so early intervention has been confirmed sort of unanimously in literature as the #1 solution to preventing eating disorders, since it is proactive and not reactive. And this is why food anxiety is the sort of issue to tackle before it becomes dangerous. So how do we do this? Well, to understand the sort of causes and implications of food anxiety in the South Asian community, the diaspora, I spoke to many experts, from clinical psychologists specializing in South Asian eating disorders to just eating disorder charities in the UK, as well as those in recovery. And all of these insights really helped me to explore opportunity spaces and ultimately validate the design solution that I'll talk you through. So here are some of my insights, some of the main insights that I gathered from speaking to this sort of large group of people. And those are that the South Asian community having fear of new foods, which stems from essentially not recognizing cuisines which aren't their own. Obviously, this isn't everybody, but this is sort of a generalization. And this includes not recognizing certain ingredients or cooking processes, worrying about food waste, from large portions if they were to try something new, and essentially the unwanted attention that this would create, which leads to a lot of food-related social anxiety and ultimately manifests itself to a negative relationship with food. For younger members of the community, because their food anxiety issues can often get lost in amongst a whole host of immigrant household issues, this leads to a sort of lack of emotional validation, a lack of autonomy, and these mental health issues can sometimes get overlooked in amongst all of the other things that are going on. And finally, having food anxiety can be a very isolating experience. Women across the diaspora and just, around the world, young women around the world experience body image issues that have been perpetuated by the media, by Western beauty standards. And it essentially just leaves them feeling very isolated and like they don't belong. And so my goals for a solution to cater to these issues was to establish ingredient transparency to allow for food exploration, instill a validating language, and develop a sense of a global community. My plan was to demonstrate that, cuisines around the world, food, it's a lot more connected, it's a lot more approachable. And this is essentially something I wanted to do. And I sort of say a bonus goal for me was to also be sort of solutionizing by drawing on my own experiences and, realizing that my experience with food was really shaped by the ingredients that I'd been exposed to or explored. It wasn't until I was 22 years old that I'd never tried Mexican food or Italian food before. Cheese is sort of famously quite absent from Bangladeshi cuisine. And so, trying an enchilada was a very interesting experience. But, I realized that it had a lot of the ingredients that I was familiar with, bar the cheese. And so it started to inspire me to look at how ingredients mapped across cuisines. And this is where where I realized that I wanted to be able to essentially develop a metric for food familiarity. And that's kind of what led to what I'm about to kind of talk you through. And so I created a cuisine map. And what I mean by that is this diagram that you can see on the screen here. And it really is the sort of epicenter of this solution, of this project. And after that thought I had about how ingredients travel and how foods are connected, I started to interview people from different nationalities, friends, family, just other people. And I started to be able to create this sort of like initial string of connections of how food is related across the globe. And looking at sort of regional similarities, which is what these solid lines represent. So I started to sort of develop this map, which is to be read in these horizontal rows, where each of these rows are essentially regions of the world. And so, through research, through interviewing people, I could kind of start to make those connections. The dotted lines here, there's only one on this graph, but the dotted lines essentially show the migration of cuisines or connections in cuisines due to colonization or, similar, just how food moves, trade. And yeah, this is obviously a very early version of the map, but you will now see that it very quickly, once I'd spoken to more people, started to look something more like this. So obviously, before I sort of go into explaining the graph a bit more, I just wanted to say that, the way I was kind of visualizing these connections started off, with my own knowledge, with my own experience, and I've made some assumptions. So, for example, I know that South Asian cuisine has a lot of variation in it. As a Bangladeshi person myself, I can vouch for these sort of differences compared to sort of Indian or Pakistani food. But I made the generalization to kind of talk about the regions and sort of broader similarities. So what then started to happen is I realized that, Indian cuisine, for example, has a lot of similarity with Indo-Malaysian cuisine, Indonesian, Malaysian food. And in turn a lot of similarities with Chinese food, which is probably why Chinese food is quite popular in the sort of Indian subcontinent. And you can see that if you're sort of reading this graph and trying to count steps between cuisines, Chinese cuisine is only 2 steps away from Indian cuisine, which I would say is my home cuisine. And so it's not a surprise that it's quite well liked within the subcontinent. And yeah, so back to this graph, sort of this more kitted out version. Again, broadly speaking, the map is sort of split into these rows. So you can see we've got the Eastern European row at the top, Western European and Mediterranean, South American, Middle Eastern, South Asian, African, Southeast Asian, and then East Asian. And these sort of formed the sort of tiers of this map. The reality, of course, is a bit more like this, where the dotted lines come in. And this is because through my research, I realized, food is so much more connected than we think. Trade, colonization, immigration, all of these things, globalization has really influenced the way in which food has traveled. And seeing this map take shape, it really validated a lot of these feelings that I had as well. So, for example, I've always found Western European cuisine to not be to my taste. It's been something that's, I've been afraid to try. And, I can kind of see why from this map, because if you kind of see Dutch cuisine, for example, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 steps away from Indian cuisine, which I would say is my home cuisine. So, I created this map and, I was just staring at it forever. I actually still have a printed version that I just keep around my desk just because I really enjoy looking at it. And it just sort of inspires me to try new things. But I wanted to be able to put this into practice, find out what other people thought about this map as well. So I ran an online workshop with a group of young South Asian women and, asked them a whole host of questions. And one of the questions I asked allowed me to create sort of mini cuisine maps for each of them. So I was asking about their home cuisine, their home food, and, what other cuisines they most liked, which ones they were, they were most just excited to have that they liked. And the results of this sort of survey generated these 8 sort of unique graphs that you can see here. And it showed that 95% of these people that I spoke to actually only ever moved 1 or 2 steps away from their home cuisine. And comparing these mini maps to then their answers of how adventurous they thought they were with trying new foods, they all, there seemed to be a sort of disconnect in the answers, because they all answered a 4 out of 5 in terms of how adventurous that they thought they were, but they were only ever moving 1 or 2 steps, according to sort of my cuisine map. And there was only one user that had moved 3 steps away, and that's because they moved from Indian food to Thai food, which again, it's 3 steps away, but there's not a whole load of variation there. So from there, it was sort of clear to me that there was perhaps more education or more knowledge required within the community about the expansiveness of the cuisine network, as well as trying to understand, what was keeping them from exploring further, if that was the case. So that, after that initial workshop, trying to understand those relationships, I wanted to be able to quantify cuisine familiarity, because I wanted to create a metric. And so I created a matrix where I was essentially calculating the fewest number of steps needed to get between any 2 points on the map. And between the 31 sort of cuisines that I had allocated, the maximum number of steps needed to, from the farthest points were 6 steps. And so came the familiarity zones, that I call them, steps 1 to 6. And these zones kind of work in my mind, in a similar way to the London Tube map, in that the higher the number of the zone, the farther you are from that cuisine to your home cuisine. And a home cuisine, I'm essentially defining as the cuisine you're most familiar with. So what does all of this mean? Well, with these familiarity zones established, the cuisine map kind of lent itself nicely to this idea of creating a personalized cuisine algorithm, in algorithm tool in some way. But to be successful in doing this, an emotional and intuitive filter also needed to be added, because my research showed me that food habits were very closely linked to mood. And with mood tracking features, they're sort of featured quite heavily in popular mental health apps. So I started to look into this intersection between mood tracking and intuitive eating. So very soon after, I discovered the hunger fullness scale, and this allowed me to sort of further incorporate this as part of my algorithm. So according to intuitive eating principles, using this hunger fullness scale, food is not recommended at all stages of the hunger fullness scale. And this is because, some people have a tendency to overindulge, show early signs, or suffer from bulimia. They tend to purge or do a form of emotional eating. And when they're upset, despite their body telling them that they're full. And therefore, they're usually, it's recommended that they do an activity instead as an appropriate distraction for them. And then once they've carried out that activity, and they're asked about their hunger fullness level again, if they are still, feeling like they want to be eating, then that's fine. But it's this idea of using intuitive eating principles to recommend what that person should be doing. So following a conversation that I had with a sensory scientist, they recommended that I incorporate these principles and add a sort of emotional and nutritional filter to my algorithm, which is why the sort of very simple process is made up of two parts. So you start off by asking the user how they feel, and they can answer based on a sort of discrete number of choices that they have, and this kind of helps decide what's going to happen at the next stage, where you ask them how hungry they are. So this essentially helps decide which familiarity zone you're going to recommend that they eat from, or what activity they do. So when you're hungry and you're in an energy deficit, so say you're upset, this can change your sensory perceptions. So you might not be in the mood for too much experimentation. So if you're sad and you're hungry, it's best not to do too much experimentation. Pavlovian conditioning states that the more differentiation there is in sensory stimulus, the more incentive there is to explore further. So I'm aware that this sort of graph on the screen isn't too legible, but I'll do my best to kind of explain what this process is showing. But essentially, the idea is that when a user is asked how they feel, depending on their mood and then depending on their hunger fullness, they're either recommended food if they're hungry. If they're satisfied, they're recommended an activity followed by food. And if they're not hungry, they're just recommended an activity. And over time, once a familiarity zone has been sort of explored thoroughly enough, the suggestions will become more and more varied. And this will be, over a period of time. So it won't be like the first day you go on and it recommends to you something from your familiarity zone, and then the next day it's like, bang, you're like 5 steps away. So the happier you are, the more the algorithm will essentially push you to try new things. So following all this research and this sort of personalized well-being algorithm in mind, it was time to kind of decide the form in which my solution would take. And so I did a sort of follow-up workshop with a large group of people, which essentially gave me the following insights. I was trying to understand, what is it that could help the community to try new foods and cuisines? And these are some of the responses that they gave. So this idea of, knowing the list of ingredients, positive affirmations, reviews, support from family and friends. And so reflecting on this, I decided that a digital platform was the best way to kind of create a solution out of these insights. And in this case, an app. And this is because it would be private, and it would be easily accessible for all users. And I think that privacy and autonomy and accessibility was something that was really important. And so I designed Foodable. So Foodable is an all-in-one platform which demedicalizes the issue of food anxiety and caters across the whole sort of spectrum of food anxiety related problems. And sort of straight into the app, it was crucial that the onboarding screens set the tone for the platform. So establishing it as an inclusive, diverse, and inviting platform. And the language was very carefully edited in collaboration with a nutritionist to provide comfort. And so the app includes 5 main sections designed to deal with different spectrums of food anxiety issues, but I'll sort of briefly go through each section. So we've got body, learn, community, document, and the calm room, and they sort of match up to some of those insights that we've talked about so far. So first we have the body section, and this has been designed, if my video works, this has been designed to provide food education. It's been designed to help people with the fear of new foods, not knowing what to eat, and learning how to listen to their body. And essentially, it puts the cuisine recommendation algorithm into practice. So you can kind of see it being used here. You try the algorithm, you fill out 2 simple questions. What kind of food you're looking for, and it recommends to you recipes, recommends to you foods that you can try, that you're able to kind of go through. Next up, we have the learn section, and the learn section has been designed to provide food education in a non-demonizing, non-numerical way. And what we mean by this is sort of no calorie data. And this section will be predominantly used to clear misconceptions about foods, food groups. And it's also a learning tool for if you go traveling and you feel out of place and you need personalized information about the food related to your diet. So this feature came out through, again, lots of traveling I enjoy doing, but a lot of the times being just apprehensive or worried about the cuisine, the local cuisine, and not really knowing what those ingredients are. So following a trip from Spain, I was kind of inspired to add this. So for example, if you were in Spain, the app would know that you were in Spain, and it would be able to kind of talk you through food habits in Spain, some local cuisines that you could try. So in this case, paella is a popular Spanish dish, often made with local seafood, chicken or vegetables. It's cooked with saffron, seafood broth, and bomba rice based on your dietary requirements, and that meaning me, and your familiarity zones. We think you'll love paella. If halal options aren't available, try the seafood or vegetable options. So that's a way in which this could take shape. Next up, we have the community section, and this has been designed for those who feel isolated in their food anxiety and need reminding that there are many others out there who feel exactly the same as them. It provides 3 layers of support depending on how willing the user is to participate, and it gives them autonomy and allows them to be silent observers if they're not ready to speak to someone yet. So they'd still be able to kind of go through some of these conversations that people are having and see how people are responding. That's the community section. Next up, we have the document section, and this has been designed for those who want to proactively track their food anxiety journey. And so the doctor's report feature was particularly popular with Megan Rowe Jones, who's someone I worked with from First Steps ED. They're an eating disorder charity. And Megan said, "We spend so much time having to chase up the NHS or CAMS when we get new patients or referrals coming in. This would save us so much time and allow us to personalize our support." And finally, the calm room. So the Calm Room is designed to deal with panic attacks, dissociation in stressful situations. It's a sort of virtual room where different pieces of the furniture are connected, are linked to sort of different apps on your phone. So some of these may be pre-programmed, others you can sort of program yourself. And I think it's just sort of worth noting that, you know, Foodable has been designed as a preventative tool, but it can't help everybody. You know, users of this app would still be encouraged to seek out, you know, professional emergency support in case of an emergency. But, you know, this app's job is to make sure that users feel safe and comforted when they are using it. And so sort of following that sort of first round, I took my app design to a fantastic group of women in Oldham with the support of the charity BAME Connect. And I essentially ran a workshop with them. And it was a super, super candid session. It's probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, just being in that room talking to these women. And they were all very complimentary of the app. And, you know, we kind of went through section by section and they gave a lot of feedback. You know, criticism, their own thoughts. And one of the biggest bits of feedback that came out from this session was the request for a language switching option. So some way for them to be able to switch the language. And yeah, many of them sort of expressed their desperation to support younger members, you know, their children in their family through food anxiety issues, but maybe they weren't able to do so because of language barriers between them, or maybe a language barrier between them and the healthcare services. And so kind of straight off of that that workshop, I started thinking about you know, bringing in different languages into the app. So this here is in Bengali, which is also a language I speak, so just wanted to kind of show it here. And yeah, the sort of expert validation was also resoundingly positive. So a lot of these fantastic people that I spoke to earlier on the project, you know, kind of had a chance to kind of demo a prototype to them. And yeah, they were all very complimentary. But my favorite quote, and the one that I want to read out, is again from Megan from First Steps ED. And she said, "This app is so inclusive. We don't have anything like this, and we need all the help we can get. We need the cultural sensitivity the app brings. And most importantly, it's a platform that parents and carers can use to share their child's mental health journey because they're desperate to be involved. It would definitely be something we use." So we're sort of coming to the end of my talk, but before I finish, I just wanted to leave you with some final thoughts that I have had about essentially inclusive design throughout this process. And the first one is start small. Inclusive design, you know, doesn't require you to solve every problem there is. And this might seem obvious, but when I first started the project, I felt, you know, very quickly, very overwhelmed at the scale that it was starting to take, you know, how far this problem, like, you know, kind of went out. But I told myself that I would consider the project a success if it, you know, even if it only helped me improve my relationship with food, that to me would be a success for the project. And in that respect, I think it's been a very successful project because I think this process has massively helped me in my relationship with the food and my understanding of food. My second point is that co-design and community are key to inclusive design. You know, listening and being a sponge to all these people that I spoke to did wonders to solve this problem. And I wouldn't been able to, you know, decipher such great insights and iterate on my designs so many times if it wasn't for these fantastic people that I worked with. You know, I worked very closely with nutritionists, with you know, the women from the BAME Connect charity, clinical psychologists, sensory scientists, to craft the language, to craft the narrative, you know, to craft each of these features that I included in the design. So yeah. And the third one is that contextualization is a slow process, but it is critical. You know, on a similar thread to the overwhelming feeling, I felt at one point, I think there were times where I doubted my ability to be able to understand that healthcare jargon or, you know, the intricacies of this whole process, but, you know, never let context stop you. Embrace it. And it's very much something that I have continued to do, you know, in my career and in my journey as a UI UX designer to this day. So context is also key. Thank you. That was everything.